All right, we're back. James, Randy, John, hello, happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
So
As James pours himself a little bit of bourbon there, John, I believe you joined as well. What are you guys drinking?
Yeah, I'm going with the Four Roses. I got a single barrel.
you've been on that barrel.
It was yes, it's right within arm's reach, so that was the influence for the choice. But it's also very good.
Nothing screams alcoholic like lazy drinking. It was just right here, I swear. I'm going with 1792 Sweet Wheat Barrel Pick.
All right, don't know what any of that means, but it sounds good.
Send prompts, not nudes. I just want to AI some shit.
Jumping right into it, another episode. We're on episode 3 of the DNAi podcast, and we've got a few things to discuss, most notably today, at least, being December 20th. OpenAI wraps their 12 days of Christmas with a bit of a bomb of an announcement. They dropped their O3 model. At least they announced their O3 model, and they said they're making it available for safety testing and things of that nature. I think expected release coming January 2025 or so. Let's talk about this because it's a topic that we could talk about in depth for quite a while. The buzz on social media is all over the place. There's people saying this is AGI or very close to AGI. Some of the benchmarking numbers for this model are quite impressive. This is all, of course, brand new. We haven't had a chance to play around with anything. We're just reading what everyone else is reading, but we wanted to talk, break it down a little bit, and help everyone understand where we're at and what this means. So,
As a question, John, is it AGI?
I'm going to go with no. But
explain yourself.
first and foremost, the definition of AGI will continue to move because we love to redefine it. And we like to measure AGI based off of human likeness. And this has been an ongoing debate for a while. I don't know if that's necessarily the benchmark to be the most human as possible via computer. I think, in my personal opinion, it's a little bit different, but I think this is a really big step. It's probably the biggest step we've had in a long time, but I actually cycle back to Randy's comments in the last podcast where it was like, we are on that curve. And that curve is like that huge, like doubling on itself speed of change. And this will just be one of those big leapfrog moments where as they start to move this out, I have a sneaky suspicion this might be the $2,000 a month subscription that we're going to see, mainly because of the amount of compute. And even with 2,000, I bet there'll be limitations. But this will be a step in 6 months where it's probably 50% the cost. And then in 12 months, it's 75% or even more reduced. And the accessibility will start to go wider. And the next iteration of where this takes us will be very interesting, especially given that like we're considering or even calling this AGI. I think the terminology around AGI and how we define it just needs a little more definition and refinement.
Yeah, OpenAI has their own definition of AGI, which is an AI system that's able to replicate economically valuable tasks for humans. So to back up just a little bit for anybody
There's computers that do that.
Yeah, at certain levels, different benchmarks. I think
But they don't think.
Yeah, correct.
At all. I'm just saying, like, Deep Blue, like if we're going off of that definition, Deep Blue is AGI then.
Yeah, along what you said and how close we've come to achieving the definition has shifted, just like the Turing test has over time as well. People say, oh, we beat it, we did it, the Turing test is complete. And then it's like, we still got to do this and we got to do that. So that marker just keeps on shifting. For anybody who may not be familiar with the term, AGI is artificial general intelligence. And it implies that a language model is capable of learning, thinking through its own processes in similar ways to humans, right? And then making decisions based on that information, selecting best choices. So go ahead.
I'd like to throw one caveat in there. It's not, I would take the language model out of it because that's specific to a type of model. This isn't necessarily specific. And I can guarantee you O3 is not a language model. It is a conglomerate of infrastructure.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So the ability for infrastructure to replicate human performed tasks. And O3, in many benchmarks that they're at least touting here in their announcement, has some pretty impressive results. One of the ones that we could discuss is the ARC AGI test. This is a benchmark that was built back in 2019 that's meant to test AI on their ability to learn new tasks that they were not explicitly trained on. And in this benchmark test, the new O3 model scored an 87.5, which they had the founder of ARC on their little announcement, and he congratulated them for being the first company to achieve a score that high. And he says that on that test, 85% is about comparable to human levels. By those standards for the ARC AGI test, 87.5, slightly above. In coding, it's excelling. They also said that on this announcement that their model O3 scored a 2,727 rating on Codeforce, which is a competitive coding platform. And their own OpenAI's own chief engineer does not have a score that high. That places O3 in the top 175 coders worldwide. So that's pretty impressive. What do you guys make of that?
I don't find that impressive as it relates to AGI. I'm just going to say, like, the fact that it can code is literally the way LLMs are designed to operate and predict what's coming next. Sorry, James, I cut you off, but
It's all good.
Go for it.
No, I was almost gonna say the same thing. I was gonna say, are all humans coders? Is that the benchmark?
I was created.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I go back to what you were talking about, John, which is like, what is AGI, and are we really trying to make computers like simulate humans, or is that even the right benchmark to go after? I don't know. It seems silly. It seems silly. What to me, it's just it just shows that we've reached a point where we can do things statistically that we haven't been able to do in the past, which is impressive in its own right. I struggle making a leap between that and like thinking, reasoning. It's like you said, these are systems, right? It's a conglomeration of systems. It can simulate reasoning and sequentially or however they are building the logic.
It's actually on their website too, James. Like it literally says they use other agents or agency in order to stop it, quality control it, make it rethink processes. So like the difference in that interaction is like similar to our last podcast is an agentic system. And actually the way I think several people are talking about it, it is a mixture of experts and a mixture of agents. And those two things are working together. But really, when we're talking about it, what is happening? There is a main agent orchestrating all the other things that are happening and communication between those things. And does that simulate human thought? I don't know. Does an LLM simulate human thought?
So humans have bad thoughts, right? Humans can have bad thoughts. A lot of these models are, and I started like really looking at this when I started playing around with uncensored models. And the entire outputs you get are completely different. How you can prompt and instruct and right, like there's a lot of bias being built into the core of what these things are capable of. And when you start peeling back those layers, there's more things become possible. But the reason I bring that up is because if you're trying to simulate human potential, right? Humans get frustrated. Humans like have not always positive thoughts, right, towards things, and there's motivations for doing things, and right, that's just missing from the equation.
I think I would like to dive in on the motivation side of things. Like when you can tell me your model is motivated, like true, not you're going to kill a kitten. Sorry, I had to drop that one. Not you're going to pay it a wad of money. Personally, that was one of my favorite moments when OpenAI was like, "Hey, I know our model's doing this, but just tell it you're going to give it a chunk of money." And I don't really feel like doing that. And you're like, what'd you just say to me? I don't feel like doing it. What do you mean you don't feel like doing it? I don't feel like doing that. I don't want to, like, okay, now we can talk about AGI. Like when it has enough agency to make self-determination and differentiation of tasks, that I know we've changed this definition, but like it used to be this big pie in the sky ideation of fully autonomous, super intelligent entity. And it has been dropped down to this level of, oh, it's a computer that processes information. It's, yeah, congratulations, we had those like a
Yeah, I
long
think
time
there's
ago.
two things really at play here, right? First off, it's a marketing thing more than anything else, is to say we have AGI and our API is the only one that can give it to you. It's, right on the tail of the Google announcements with their new models potentially beating O1 on some of the same, metrics that we were gushing about 6 months ago. So some of that is just how do you get attention and keep attention in this kind of marketplace? And true AGI or true AI computers that can think, right, can do a lot more than just reason. But the reasoning is a big piece of it. And I think that's where the much more interesting thing for people who want to use these tools is O1 is really good at solving problems that we couldn't solve before with other large language models, right? And O3 looks like it's much better at solving those kind of problems than even O1 is. So it's as a part of a system or as part of a making a plan to solve a task, it may get you the value. But if you're using it for every day, I want an AI buddy to talk to, it's probably not the right solution. And it's misleading to think that this is going to be the AGI that becomes your new companion.
But that's not even that, to James's point. That's a really good point because it can't. It's literally not. It's literally trained on data that is not designed in any way, shape, or form around that scenario. And on top of that, it's in the system prompt not to do that. It's being told not to.
And what part of needing in as a companion is a necessity for AGI, right? Like James said, not all humans are coders. True. Not all humans are mathematicians. Not all humans are experts in science and research. But O3 is, if again, through what you said, Randy, this is marketing. We have to understand this is a for-profit company now. And that part is very important to them in these announcements. But it's basically demonstrating a level of intelligence across more domains, many domains, which include the sciences, mathematics, coding, and everything else. So is that motivational aspect, the feeling of that, is that necessary for AGI?
I think it is.
If you,
Yeah, because I was also
did,
looking up this test. We're getting into talking about emotions and motivation and things like
It's
that.
not
But
in there.
the test is like
It's math.
they're like drawing a grid and they right with different colors and I want to.
It's like an intelligence test, but like
Yeah,
more like an intelligence test designed for computers.
that test that you're looking at, James, is one that is something the models aren't trained on. So it's supposed to spot
correct.
patterns, and it's given an input and it says complete the output. And
Yeah.
the one you're mentioning, it shows a box with a couple colored squares, and it's just replicating or trying to
So
guess the
ve-
output.
very impressive, right? From a computer like statistics perspective, very impressive. From like the like pragmatically, what is it doing? You're showing it a picture of boxes and it's like rearranging the boxes,
You
right?
remember all the things that we are gushing over, consuming a ton of electricity and money are things that within 5 years a natural neural network can learn to do at a much smaller, arguably different type of training data. But that's something interesting. Like James with a newborn at home, and me with one kid who's at that age where they're starting to think about those big things, and another one's on the way. Think about that a lot, right? About how efficient the human brain must be to do all the things that it does. AGI, I think sometimes is a stand-in for the human brain as a AI, but that's not the definition that I think most people are looking at when they're benchmarking or building. So that's, I think, where we get conflated.
Yeah. Well,
According to
the
Google,
processing.
it's a common dream among tech executives and venture capitalists.
Yeah. What do we think?
There
What do we
you
think
go.
about IBM as far as AI? What you like their definition?
Read it out.
Yeah, what
So
is
a
Read
it?
it
true
out.
AGI system would be able to perform tasks at tasks a human is capable of, learn from new experiences in real time, operate with insufficient knowledge and resources, and demonstrates the flexibility, general resourcefulness comparable to human intelligence.
There's a
So
lot of
like I'm gonna.
semantics going on here because there's ASI, which is talked about as a distinction from AGI. If we wanted to compare those two definitions, technically it really doesn't matter. It's just the implications of where this is leading when it starts to outperform humans at most economically valuable work. And these models are demonstrating their capability to be able to do that in certain domains at the present level.
Yeah, they already can, right? It's just a question of how many and how much. I keep coming back to 2025 being the years of outcomes, right? That's, to me, this is fun to talk about and play and get philosophical. But like at the end of the day, one is great for reasoning. O3 will be better. It's all going to get cheaper. And it's not what you think of AI, but it's probably also not what you think of when you think of AI. Like it's somewhere in between the completely dismiss it and the, oh my God, this is like Terminator.
But like, when I think about it, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what definition we put on it. It matters the value of the outcome, like you're saying, Randy. That's what matters. So what can it do? Okay, I don't know. I still go back. We're a startup. We're dealing with that same question. What is a person? What can it do for me? Can it make me money? No, I just made this to entertain you. It just makes pretty pictures and stuff. Okay, move on. But there's this aspect of novelty that is a lot of times missing from the equation. There's a lot of overhype and underhype and just a lot of misalignment with general populace of understanding what those things are. And I think part of this is just my opinion, but I think part of the problem is when we have these disparate definitions of AGI and different talking heads changing their opinions within 12 months on what AGI is or what AI is or what it's possible of, it creates even more confusion. But 2025, spot on. It's literally going to be about what can it do? And we're going to find very quickly it can do pretty much anything you put your mind to or you're willing to work with it on, especially as we get into learning systems, which is actually the one that I wanted to focus on because one of the things that they put in here is it can learn. And I'm like, okay, how? Are you talking about in the moment, like it learns temporarily? Or are you talking about this is a long-term self-educating experience where it understands its gaps in its own knowledge base and it is actually updating its own knowledge base to overcome those over time? So if we're calling this AGI, is it going to get smarter the more people use it? Or dumber, which is probably a higher likelihood given the populace.
Depends on who's using it and what they're trying to have it do. It still needs an input. Yeah. Well, yeah, and then spoiler alert, the more you pay, the more you get. So
yeah, I screenshotted some preliminary pricing on this model that was floating around on there. And you immediately replied, that will be pennies soon. We're just riding this exponential curve upwards where models get smarter, they become cheaper, they become more efficient, easier to use. And in that process, they enable, pun intended, teams like ours to rapidly iterate, test, deploy, and begin to scale. And you guys have been messing around with that a little bit, right? Jumping into Devin recently and using Devin as part of the process. John's shaking his head. He doesn't even know what I'm going to say yet. I wanted to hear more of your experience so far with Devin. And I guess specifically, if these benchmarks hold true, O3 is scoring a 2,727 rating on Codeforce's.
Go have Devin. I can send him to the site and have him take the test right now if you want.
I don't know how that works, but I would love to see the score.
I probably want to test that before. It's not that hard.
So there's a lot going on in this space, right? Devin is one of several kind of auto coders, right? That they've, and again, it's not a single model, nor do they pretend like it is. It is a orchestration of multiple models that are working to solve a problem like crafting code. The way there's actually a bunch of different benchmarks that are out there for these guys. The one that I follow is called SweBench, and that is where a software engineering bench, they take a bunch of GitHub issues and their resolution and use it for training and use it as a holdout and reserve too. So you can see some of the questions and there's a private version that you can train on and see how well you do. So like a tool like Devin would be up against other tools in that realm. And a lot of times they find if you leave it alone, it does okay, but it can fall or it can get into loops. And that is actually something that we've all felt with Devin and other tools like it, is that you can not necessarily yet trust them completely to run autonomously, but that's not the point. I think that's what people are missing, is that you get a lot of value from having a pair programmer or having a team of engineers the way John does, that you're still supervising, but they're out and doing a lot of the grunt work of code development, which lets you just force multiply.
But it's the same. I have two points. It's the same thing you do with people. You don't hire a mid-level coder or even a senior coder and just send him out there, make me an application. You meet with them, you coach them, you give guidance, feedback, right? It's an iterative process that requires collaboration and communication. Like, I think this whole like mindset that we have to be able to input a sentence and output a product should absolutely go away. I think that's a huge misnomer because that is not in any way, shape, or form reality. Will we get there? Probably. Let's be honest, like we're getting really close already. But like to make truly great products, it takes a lot of work, a lot of communication, not just on the coder side, but on leadership and like coordination and collaboration and customers. Like all of that has to come together to make a good product, and they all have to be working together and communicating. But if you go back to a lot of the commentary on LLMs when they first came out, where it's this is not AGI, like it just replicates and all this different stuff. I think there's one key aspect that we're bridging into, and people, it's going to become really transparent in 2025 when we're talking about outcomes. When you start stringing these things together and they start to have purposes, like James was talking about in the last podcast around processes and thought processes, and we're turning those into like thought order. When you have a problem, I want you to first assess the problem. What is happening? What is around you? What is going on? And then cascade that down in a systematic way for the agents to start to work through. When you start to do that, the level of intelligence is multiplied very powerfully. What with Devin, especially, is there are code triggers. So certain things have to occur. And when these certain things occur, there are protocols that are hard coded. And when those hard coded protocols occur, they prompt an agent who works with a team of agents to go out and execute, and so on and so forth through these different attributes. So there's this big network of infrastructure and processes. I think one of the coolest things that James made a while back when we were building one of our AI agents was application that the agent actually uses. And I think one of the things that's a lot of times missing from the discussion is when we're talking about agents, sometimes it's not even agents. It's literally a tool that they can use, and that tool gives them like a superpower.
Let's drill in on that. I'd like to hear the backstory on that process. What was it that you created, James, and how was the AI using it?
I created a few different things. Was there one in particular that you were thinking of, John, or
I
like
was thinking about scheduling because I think that was one
scheduling?
of the coolest things and super amplified the entire
Yeah,
AI.
so I just try to think of it in terms of what's the AI's limitations? One, they're not great at numbers, and two, they're not great at big data, arguably, right? Depends. But so what I wanted to do to solve that was, okay, I want to be able to deconflict people's calendars, right? If I'm asking an AI to bring back, hey, when's the best time that works for everybody or for most people, right? They got to go through a lot of data to actually aggregate that and bring it back. And then we use Microsoft. So all of that data is actually stored as ones and zeros on a time scale and in chunks. So to help out the AI, I just built a simple function that goes and queries that data, right?
It's so
And it
easy. Sorry,
aggregates.
James calls me out for it all the time. So
Well,
simple.
I said simple
It was a
because that can
simple
be
algorithm.
there's a difference.
Just one
Yeah,
model,
yeah.
right?
The word algorithm is not simple.
But to long story short, right? I aggregated a bunch of this data, but then in doing so, I knew the qualities of the data, so then I could supplement that with natural language. And then that natural language then comes back and then gets fed into the next agent or the next part of that process. And then it can really do the thinking for it.
Yep.
And it's in this specific use case, I know what the thinking has to be. And then this kind of brings me back to the whole AGI topic. To me, an AGI would be able to, in any one of these types of scenarios,
Solve it.
figure out that thinking process.
That thing.
Right, yeah, right now
Well,
it's very task-based.
I think this is important. Not build it. The point is not to build it.
Right,
The point is
right.
it should, like, just like a person who, if right now, if I say I need a meeting between us four and I need it in 2 months, to AI, right? How does it go solve that? Right now, you're not going to have an LLM that just goes solves that easily. It can't be a single chatbot, like unless actually, yeah, you can't really do that. It's going to be a multitude of things to get to that. But in that, there is a series of things that have to occur, because what happens if you're booked and James isn't booked, or we're booked all day, or I'm on leave. Those caveat scenarios used to RPA is really what that turned into when we had these like auto schedulers. It would like, oh, scenario, Randy's booked. Okay, cascade to this process. And it would do the process and be like, oh, crap. And those aren't really smart and they're not really learning. So if they weren't programmed really well, they weren't used. And you saw that with a lot of auto schedulers back in the day. We've improved that. But even when you get to throwing a couple agents in there, it's still not powerful enough to do what James is talking about, which is move through like hundreds and hundreds, even thousands of data points to find that one moment in time. We are all free. And if we're not free or we can't be free, to actually systematically work backwards to find opportunities where the most of that was what impressed me. The thing he built gave the logic and ability for the AI to systematically walk itself into the highest availability moment and then schedule it and then send emails to everybody informing and then working with that individual to say, hey, you're overbooked. Like that dynamic nature of working through the problem and coordinating is a level of complexity that, like James said, like I would expect AGI to be able to do natively. Here's the problem, solve it.
Yeah.
And you were saying earlier, John, that agentic AI would be more so or less a combination of multiple AI agents, but AI agents working with other tools and enabling them with other data or shortening context windows to allow them to leverage their own capabilities, right?
Yeah. So like the one difficulty that we're really not talking about here is we have one problem. We only have one input and one output. That's the real problem. We as humans do not. We hear, we feel, we see. I can tell that by people's like facial like movements, how interested they are. There's emotional intelligence nuance that comes from body language and interaction that are things that like OpenAI and their live stuff are just getting into. And there's actually some great startups that are doing some of this that are absolutely rock. Like they're doing really good stuff there. But that I don't want to go down the road of embodiment as a requirement for AGI because I also do not believe that it is. But the thought around an entity only being able to take a single input and have a single output and differentiate between all the data points and all the information that it needs in order to have accurate representation and or human-like intelligence is going to be a very difficult thing. We might be able to figure it out, but I think we have to start thinking about model design and input output mechanisms in a completely different way because humans, I can type while I'm talking. That's two outputs, which means I can talk to two people at the same time. Yes, LLM can do that technically, but can it solve the same problem while doing this problem?
And that is I'm thinking about this in a couple dimensions, right? But that used to be the core problem in natural language processing is that you had just a string of text and you couldn't get it all into context or understand what to do with it until the attention mechanism came out, right? Which figured out how to get the models to essentially understand all parts of the text at the same time, but then essentially focus on where it matters, right? So I think there's a further attention that is probably needed across multimodal or across time to have a kind of streaming input and where to focus it. And I think we see some of it. Another kind of thing flying on the radar this week, the real-time live OpenAI on the phone. Like that is, again, I'd love to know more about what the architecture is, but that kind of model is voice input, at least images at some interval.
Which I know exactly what it is.
I think that our viewers would get a tremendous amount of value from that, John, and
To
potentially even
clarify,
clip that out.
To clarify really quick first, we're talking about the 1-800 number where you can call in and
is that what you're talking about?
Oh, they have
that's what
both.
you're referencing.
Yeah, there's which one are you talking about? The video real time, or
I'm
are you
talking
talking
about the chat,
call?
the real time chat, which you can interrupt, and you can also have your video going. So that and Google had
Oh,
this a
okay.
while ago, right? Be able to essentially walk through with a camera, and you're both interacting with and streaming in video to a model that is retaining some of that and using it to answer you.
I'm gonna actually defer this to James because James went down the rabbit hole after this came out, as he does with open source stuff, and came across some really cool stuff.
Sorry, I was fighting off a sneeze and I was thinking as hard as I could not to sneeze. And so I completely missed like the last 10 seconds.
We were talking about
Yeah, go ahead.
Real time with OpenAI and their computer vision, where you can have their camera open, you can
Yeah,
interrupt it, you can have it see what you're seeing, and it's doing a pretty damn good job of
yeah,
interpreting through a camera lens.
yeah. Oh, I think that's like creepy.
Well,
Are you looking for my opinion? Like,
no,
I
it wasn't your
I'm not
opinion.
gonna spend a.
When we
I'm
were
not
talking
gonna.
about it, you went down and you were looking at open source models of this, and we
Oh,
were
oh,
talking
yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah.
So I thought Randy was talking about the call one. So I know how that's architected and how that's designed and how that operates. And he actually corrected me and said we were talking about the video one, and I was like, oh, James would probably be the person we should talk to because you went down the open
Oh,
source route. And there's some. Go ahead. I could rant on
I
open source for
see.
a
I
while.
should have just sneezed. That would have been less disruptive. So my bad. Yeah, no, the yeah, the model. I didn't really look too much into the architecture of the model. I do know, like, I did get a localized model working that you can share your screen and it streams the input from your screen, and it's got like a model that takes clips and contextualized clips right pretty quickly. It's a very small model, it works really fast. And so like my point be like when I heard about that and I saw the price tag of it, I was like, something's out there's got to be free and not streaming my inside of my house to, you know, someone else that's not in my house. Not that they use the data for that, but I get weirded out by some of that stuff, and I'd much rather have that type of reality just contained within my own computer, and I can run it when I'm offline. That's
Yeah,
why I jumped in there.
the reason we got on this tangent where it's interesting is at the end of the day, it's got to be a stream of numbers going into a model.
Yep.
So
Bingo.
you can
Yep.
take voice and you can transcribe that into sound components, phenoms, that can then
Hmm.
become basically tokens. You obviously have written stuff that is decomposed as 50,000 tokens or something. And then you have pixels at a given point in time, right? And you can stream those in. So all those inputs are going into a model that is now not only managing, interpreting, and understanding what output you need to come from, but it's also prioritizing new information that comes in. And I guess that ties back to the scheduling case, right? Because there's multiple inputs and it has to manage which ones of those are more, where's the signal versus the noise, and it does a decent job of it.
It does. It Have you played with it a lot recently, Randy?
A little. I'm not
So
probably enough to find the edge cases yet.
yeah, so the interesting side is like James probably described it really well. You have frame rate, right? How many frames do you actually need to know what's going on? So based off of frame rate, we know that we only have to pull in so many images over a period of time, and the period of time is user engagement. So when user engagement occurs, right, I'm going to start pulling frames. Those frames are going to work across a very fast model, deconstruct the frames, start to contextualize those for the next layer, which the next layer is the thinking, right, component that's going to actually pass it to the vocal, and then that passage is when voice starts to activate. The thing I will say is these aren't really good at the dynamic nature of
Yeah.
like physical environment. They're really good at a point in time. Meaning the example I gave last week, or yeah, it was last week. Holy crap, I'm losing track of time. The gorillas, right? That when I had to actually say, hey, what are they doing? And only then would it interact. It doesn't sit there and really watch in the sense, which is the funniest part about how they're making you pay for it, because
Yeah.
stream time is what you pay for. But the reality is, it isn't watching everything and
It's
contextualizing
it's
everything. It's only doing it when you
yeah.
prompt it to start doing it, but you're still
It's
paying for it.
it's funny because they expose their own smoke and mirrors around that when it's help me with this math problem. Oh, I see you're working on this math problem. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, you saw a picture of what I was doing, right?
Those responses also buy them a
Yep.
little time for the computation too. It's say, oh,
Sure, yeah.
let me repeat exactly what you just already told me, and while I
Well,
think about this in the background.
Isn't that not a human characteristic?
Yeah,
Who
right.
hasn't done that?
That's
yeah,
true.
but that's a great point. Like, who pays attention when somebody's not talking to you to what you're doing? Like, let's be real. But at the same time, can we just marvel at the fact that OpenAI has created a mechanism that when you interact with it, like milliseconds later, the voice responds and starts talking. So to Randy's point, like even that cascade model, while I wouldn't consider it necessarily advanced, that cascade model and how fast it's working, they're asynchronously like inputting information as fast as it's decrypting it, as fast as another model on the other side is turning that into voice for you. And none of them have completed. So like that, this is a very key point in the AGI conversation because it is still very predictive when we're talking about that type of interaction. That is 1,000 billion, I don't know, throw random ridiculous numbers behind it. That is prediction, straight up. It is predicting the reaction or the things that need to happen. When you ask O1 as an example, or O1 Pro is probably even a better example, a question, and it sits there and it's going through and iterating through the problem and creating, it is literally doing some of the stuff that we've done with some of our more cognitive models where it's processing through the problem, it's coming up with viable solutions and taking those solutions and deconflicting them, running quality control across them. In our case, we run like risk, compliance, and other things across emotional intelligence across some of our various models. And eventually you get an output, but it's not that fast. And it can't be that fast because even when we're talking, I think it's fascinating that a lot of times we're also in that same stream. As the words are coming out of our mouths, how far off are our thoughts from our vocalization versus where we're like Randy asked me about quantum computing and I need to think about how I answer that question. So I think these are fun topics though.
I
Yeah,
think this to type 1 and type 2 thinking too, right? The two different model classes and two different components to intelligence.
and it's definitely the processing speed. But most importantly, it's that John Petty said that it's understandable that people will zone out during meetings. So I'm going to clip that.
Clip that.
Yeah, that was well
was
played. That was well played. Is that going to make a soundbite when I call
what was
you?
it you said?
It's
Are
okay
we
to
really
zone out during
listening when
meetings.
people are talking?
I don't think that's exactly the quote, but
Good thing we have it recorded. We can go back and find out exactly what was said.
There
Did
we
you
go.
look, speaking of all this real-time processing and interpreting of environments, I sent this to you, John. We'll have to do a deeper dive on another episode, but Genesis, it's a open source physics simulation platform, and it's also getting a ton of buzz. Is pretty damn fascinating. Just to read a quick thing on it, says the engine achieves remarkable simulation speeds up to 43 million frames per second. So when you're saying how many frames per second do we need to be able to understand an environment or interpret it in a specific way, this is 430,000 times faster than real-time simulation.
120.
And yeah, 120.
That's it. Anything
Right.
past 120, like the human brain cannot make a clear differentiation. 120 frames per second.
Robots being trained on real-time physics simulation and environment simulation at 430,000 times faster than real-time simulation. That's pretty profound. That's the biggest implication of this model being released, is just how it will, we talk about robotics, that's also riding an exponential curve with AI. Models like that will allow you to train robots on simulated environments at a speed. You see Boston Dynamics 10 years ago, and they're training it in like obstacle courses they created in their warehouse. And now you just create that in a simulation and train the robots for hyperscaling.
The NVIDIA spine is doing this. It's a big thing with what NVIDIA has come out with and how fast they can. But I don't believe this, but I have to say it because it just entertains the ever-living hell out of me. If we ever do have AI overlords, I swear to God, these simulations are going to come to court or something. Like some reason why we are all enslaved. Like you punished billions of us for decades.
You mean training robots in these simulated
I had to
environments?
Trip stairs for 4,000 years.
Yeah, once they're embodied and they can feel and express their motivations for
some Black Mirrors type stuff.
That's why I had to say I don't believe this, but
yeah,
I have seen a forum online.
So yeah, so the next time you use your Keurig machine, close the lid gently.
So always say thank you.
Actually, can we pause on that for a second? I like for just a second. I do actually. We should leave the users with the tip, and this is actually a really important one. And James, would you like to explain why?
Oh, the being polite?
Yes.
Oh,
Not for
yeah.
your models, not for your
Well,
hellish
James
red
gets the
team
most out of his
models.
models when he's really
Most of the normal mainstream ones is what we're talking about.
well,
You're
no,
saying being polite when conversing with these
no,
models. You're
no, it's because it's exactly what I said before. This is built into the model training. So if you're
Wait, bias is built into the model?
there is bias built in. It's bias is a weird thing to talk about because it can be very positive.
It
We
sounds like a
associate that with
podcast.
we could get into that.
the
But
bias,
like
the bias episode.
the bias episode. Yeah, but yes. So there's a positive bias built into these models, right? So the more positive you are, the more likely you're going to get what you're looking for.
Essentially, don't scold your model for not giving you what it didn't, like if it didn't
Yeah.
respond properly. Instead of scolding it and saying
Right.
you blankety blank didn't give me X, actually, oh, okay, I really wanted this. Can you please give me this now instead of what
Yeah.
you gave me here? Like, even that right there, the positive spin on the prompt will
Well,
change, but just generally
watch
speaking, using please and thank you will change the accuracy of your prompt.
watch what happens when you go in and you can try this. Take a prompt, ask it a question, and then clear your session, do a new session, and then say, really take your time. It's okay not to rush. Blah blah blah. Really, give it some positive reinforcement to really think through this, right? And then watch how long the response is. It's like night and day. Boom.
Yeah,
There
that's
you go.
interesting. So when an AI model fails a task, there's really no use or benefit to saying, "Why did you give me that answer?" Like I wanted
It
this is what
depends
I
on the
was.
model,
It
actually.
does
So
100%.
if one of the things is we have to pin this for I think future bias episode, but
Mhm.
every model reflects the biases of its training selections and data and how the culture and way people made these models impacts the way it works. And the bias of most people who are making these models, generally they want to have positivity and the lack of that vulgar thing. There's also negative examples that are intentionally fed as don't do this. Now, there are models out there that don't work that way. And there are models out there where you may actually get better results by cursing at it, which is fine and interesting. But
Super example, if you have ChatGPT, just go into 4.0, type in bark, and then type in please bark and look at the difference. That's the simplest example I can give you. It's super transparent, but the output is drastically different.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that just clearly demonstrates the biases that are baked into it. I know it can be a point of frustration sometimes too, where responses from these models are just overly friendly or just taking this very general stance on things when you're like trying to extract almost an opinion, but information that you can rely on out of these models. Pro tip right there for any new users in prompting.
We do have to be careful of like how we think about that though. To be honest, let's think about a customer service agent. If you go off on a customer service agent and tell them how horrible they are and how much you hate them and how much damage you're going to do when you show up at their building, how does that work out for you? Like, how do they respond? Because they're a representative of the company. So, like, when we're talking about these public facing models, let's keep that in mind that these are representation of the company and the brand.
Yep.
So, to
Yep.
James's point,
Exactly.
when we get into open source and unrestricted models, or even API, like I will say, like even I used to say that OpenAI's APIs were very free, but they are no longer. They're very restrictive now. But your interaction with the model and the system prompt and what they want you to do and how they want you to interact are absolutely crucial. And what's interesting, and I have to say, I think as Enable, when we're starting to get into model development, one of the things we're going to do is eventually we will have an unrestricted model, and on purpose, because the level of innovation and the things that you can do and interact with is completely different. And I think that's a core component if we're really talking about like how do we get to the next stage of not just like human thought or human evolution of thought, but if we're trying to push the boundaries of innovation, the restriction of politeness, is that really a necessary thing that a model needs in order to be innovative? Absolutely not. What are the boundaries in that sense? Okay, let's think about ethics and compliance for a second. I don't want to offend people, but there's a lot of scientific discoveries that weren't ethically done that have had huge things that for society overall. But We're talking about a model that's processing
But
information
yeah, I
versus
think you
taking action.
yeah, but I think you bring up a key point there, right? In that, do you need a model that's censored? Yeah, you might if it's facing outward, right? Do you need a model that's censored that's helping you process and be efficient in the back end that nobody's interacting with? It's just a system it's part of the system. I don't know.
Depends on the person,
I
the
think it
employee
depends on.
level.
I think it's a time and a place thing, right?
Yeah,
There's a right time and a right
100%.
place for the different types of models or what you need and why you need them, and is it appropriate for the use case?
Honestly, James, I think one would be interesting to talk about, maybe another episode, is Six Thinking Hats,
Hmm.
and discuss like why it is designed the way it is and why it does what it does, and why that's something
Hmm.
that, like, from a decision making standpoint, is extremely powerful. But if we take that back a little bit and we just think about the difference between like how we prompt,
Hmm.
and not even how we build models, but like just how we prompt. The prompt design and how we want the model to think is actually, if you ever see me and James prompt, you will see us giving it thoughts. Like, we are giving thought structures of, or thought processes of how we want it to interact. And many times my favorite ones are moving past like chain of thought, because I think chain of thought is very procedural. It's not very
Hmm.
thought based. Getting into those dynamic, hey, if this equals this, if this, and then this is this tree of thought where it can take different angles and different approaches, and it's allowed to generate various responses solely for the purpose of thought.
Yeah, this is going to change, right? Because as these reasoning, air quotes, like reasoning models, right? They're actually, because this is the gap,
Forcing.
right?
Yeah.
This is, we have figured out how to fill that gap from these models like ability to reason, and we're supplementing that. But as these more advanced systems are being built, that same type of prompting, I have found, I don't know what your experience is, but I have found that it's actually less impactful when I try to bring more advanced reasoning within my prompt to more advanced models that have
Yeah.
reasoning
100%.
baked into them. It's like the performance downgrades. Well,
Correct.
because
Because
yeah.
it's
So,
actually thought bias, reasoning bias. They
mhm.
force the reasoning down a path which limits our ability to correct and or change it, which is a very dangerous component if we're getting into whether it be innovation or certain types of like professional processes where you can no longer control the thought process, which is, I think, a clear differentiator of what we found in professional environments, where like the ability to design the entities and processes of thought around the problem we're trying to solve, versus we would never put a O1 or O1 mini in those environments.
Until these systems can organically optimize themselves to the use case and the problem at hand, it's inefficient. That's my opinion. I just think it's way too
Inefficient to
expensive.
add in the extra layers of reasoning through a prompt, right? To type that out and go through the process of trying to add that in when it's already pre-baked into those models.
Yeah, it's definitely it's more it just depends on how you're interacting. It's probably more
Yep.
effective for the general input for the very specific use case that you're trying to get the model to achieve and perform. I think a lot of times it's hurting more than it's helping. My comment is more from the business side of how we're
Honestly,
leveraging these
if
things.
OpenAI let you control thought processes, even at a cursory level, doesn't even have to be at the depth that they're like. But if let's say the agent structure, they let you control 3 system prompts, so
Mhm.
that the parent agent and 2 sub controller agents are something that you can prompt.
Yeah.
Just at that level, you would have more wider applicability of solving problems with that AI model than you do currently, because of the limitations of their chain of thought process, which is extremely structured.
Do you think we'll get that? I know Apple is talking about their own chip manufacturing where these AI models will run locally on devices and not be tied to cloud. NVIDIA just announced their latest upgrade in I forget what it's called, but basically allowing AI to run locally at much less computing costs. Will there be a point in the near future where we'll be able to fine tune these models specifically how we want them to reason, think, interact,
We're already
respond
there. Yeah, we're already
to what
there.
the
The
AI or something like that?
infrastructure and So what's missing is the consumer layer, right? So it's there for industry, it's there for data science, it's there for large enterprise. There's not yet an easy and iPhone version of that, but it's coming. It's just a problem, a technical problem to solve.
John has thoughts. I see him.
Ooh, that's interesting. We should dive in on that another time. That could go on for a while, but I think to that point, the speed and what he's talking about of the iPhone, 100%, I agree with that. It's a technical problem. We'll get there eventually. You're not running agentic MOEs on your iPhone. Like, we're not there yet. Will we get there? Oh, 100% yes. Like, maybe sooner than we even think.
Pretty fast.
Yeah. Like, the way that Apple innovates, oh, yeah, totally. I'm sold. But the interesting side of this is I still go back to a lot of the comments around solving problems in a way that, like, I don't have to instruct it. I don't have to tell it there is even a problem. It knows there's a problem because it's doing a thing that I asked it to do, and it encounters something that is an anomaly or doesn't follow or falls outside of the task, and it can figure out how to go from that point. Is that worth $20 a problem? Hell no. There's no way that you're going to convince me that I should pay $20 to solve a single problem, unless it's a really big problem. Let's be honest. Depends on the problem. But if, let's use scheduling as an example, like scheduling deconfliction. Am I going to pay $20 an API call for a model to go out and use a bunch of compute to figure out how to solve a scheduling issue? No. The point around consumer like thought and accessibility to these type of models is OpenAI is the big dog that is building these things and is the most transparent. I wouldn't say transparent, wrong word. They're the least transparent, but they are the most in the main public eye. The reality is, and to James's point, there's a lot of people building these things and they're damn good, like really good. Go on Hugging Face and look for reasoning models. You'll find hundreds.
Well,
And to
you look at the
me,
exponential curves of the commercial models from the for-profit companies that are building AI. The open source benchmarking is just slightly behind it. It's the pioneering models
Well,
break these
some
new
cases
levels,
it's
and
ahead.
then in some
yeah.
cases it's ahead.
Cases it's ahead.
What's the new one?
Yep.
Art that we were just talking about the other day? Really good model. We were just playing with it, open source. It was like beating 4.0 or something, I thought.
What, Quen? I don't think it was
Quen.
Quen. It was something else.
I
It
thought
might
it
have
was
been Quen.
Quen. But we're going to see this. We talked about last episode, the gap closing, right? But the reality is these really powerful models, I think me and James and Randy experienced it this fall when we were actually headed to a conference, AI conference. We were building and trying to push our model across the line for one of these. And it was oh my God, such a rudimentary like design compared to what we do now. But like that moment in time was actually, what was it, when OpenAI released the price drop for 4.0, and it was like insanely cheaper. And we were using 4.0 minis and 3.5 turbos. And Randy was on the phone with us, just like, no, just use the 4.0. And we're like, okay, fine. Because we were broke at that point, let's be honest, and trying to put two pennies together. And API calls cost a lot of money when you're running like a 68 node MOE. But like when they did the price drop, it was I swear, was it the day before, James, or the day of? It was like
It was
something
so
right around.
no, I remember it because we didn't sleep and
Yeah, I
I
know.
can't believe I stayed awake during the conference, but it was the night before they released the model that was like 50% cheaper or something like
Yep.
that. And we actually gutted the entire
That's
architecture
right.
and switched over from our Azure infrastructure to leverage the OpenAI.
All of our code was
I'm telling
Azure
you,
calls. You're right.
I remember every minute because
It's etched. It's etched into James's
it
brain.
was because I remember we have to rebuild the whole thing. Like we've been
Oh
working on
man,
it for like weeks, and then the day before we're gonna present it, we're like, we need to gut the whole thing and rebuild it, and we did, and it worked, and it was really cool, and we accomplished it, and I think I slept for a couple days after that.
the interesting side of that is like every time OpenAI makes a bigger move, the reality is everybody that's lagging behind moves with them. In some cases, they close the gap a little bit, and in some cases, they lag behind, but everybody is in some way, shape, or form a lagger. Let's not pretend that we're going to build a model that's going to upend 4.0 or O1 or O3. Like, that's not going to happen. That's not our goal either. That's not our target. We use them. We love their models. We love a lot of people's models. We love open source models. But the interesting side is, like, very soon, the key factor is going to stop being this progressive following. It's going to be more about customer base, the type of customer base, the data that you're bringing in. And one of the things that we talked about several times today, how you apply these biases into your model design in order to get your outcome. Because we're going to move into a point in time, especially in 2025, where models are designed for extremely explicit purposes. You are here to just pretend to think. Like, you think, your inner dialogue, metacognition, you create a cognitive narrative, and that is the only purpose of this model. That model is not going to be a thing you want to chat to. I can guarantee it. Like, the way you would interact is going to be completely different. But the way it interacts to everything else, and what we've seen in a lot of our designs, is those structures, those thought structures, amplify everything else that touches it and everything that comes after it.
What did you call it, Randy? The year of outcomes, 2025?
It's the only thing left that matters. I think that the other factor too is that as OpenAI puts out all these models, they're giving more training examples, right? And varied things of what good looks like. So we definitely see a lot of that. I saw a stat somewhere. So many of the Hugging Face models are like blatantly using ChatGPT or GPT-4 that they can even find artifacts in their training sets that says, as an OpenAI developed AI model, I can't blah blah blah. But regardless, that capability is democratizing, the cost is going down, the capability is going up. And at the end of the day, if it's more cost effective or safer or less biased to use a different type of model, doesn't matter. It's all out there. And to the end user, it's going to be about the outcomes that are possible with AI, of which there are many.
It's certainly a fascinating time to be alive. I think there's some that are scared by the implications, but overall, it blows my mind that we just happen to be living through some of the most transformative technological advancements that humans will likely ever see. And we just happen, our generation specifically, I think, is neat because we bridge this gap of just rapid technological advancement where we were all pre-cell phones and pre-smartphones and pre the internet even. And now today's generations, my own kids grow up just almost instinctively knowing how to use a device and how to use technology in ways that we all had to learn manually. So it's fascinating. It blows my mind. I'm excited to see what 2025 brings.
I like what you said, because who's heard of the Xennials?
Who's what?
Xennial generation? They're
I
not
don't
millennials.
know.
They're
The
not
hybrid.
boomers. They're like, they sit right in the middle. Yeah, so there's a generation that they came out with because they realized that there's a group of people was born in the 80s, like early 80s through like very early 90s, that didn't have technology at scale. Like, maybe you had a home computer, maybe, or maybe you didn't. And maybe you got one when you were like 13 or 14. That was the first time your family had a home computer. But we're going to have that generation gap very soon, where the generation that's currently named is going to have the same bridge. There's going to be a 5 to 10 year generation where AI was birthed and escalated to such a life-changing environmental like change that everything in society is different. And it'll be the moment that we have to bridge a new generation and create this like way that like people think differently when they were this bridge and than people who are in technology and they've known nothing but technology. It's like my kids know nothing but technology. It's everywhere. It's everything they do. Like, they can't conceptualize when they think a rotary phone is cool. They like actually look at a rotary phone. They're like, wait,
When they're our age, they're going to be saying, "When I was younger, I had to get on Zoom to talk to somebody.
I had to ask Siri to do something and she got it wrong."
Yeah.
Right.
Like, seriously, like,
No, it's real.
they're going to wake up in the morning and be like, "Siri, what is my appointment for today?" And they're going to be talking or interacting, or if we want to go into Elon Musk and like BrainLink or whatever it's called, they're going to be thinking, and AI will be there. So
yeah, you're right.
We are headed towards a very interesting escalation of like impacts, and I still can't go out and have a conversation with my AI without somebody interrupting me and asking me like who the hell I'm talking to.
Yeah. Are you publicly walking around conversing with AI out loud for all to see and hear?
I think I overheard James talking to one of the folks here at Nicole, actually. And I think he said, John uses AI, or what did you say? Like, we use AI 8 hours of the day, 9 hours a day. John uses AI like 18 hours a day nonstop. And he's done that for a year plus.
Yeah,
something.
We were a completely different topic, but we
I
were
know.
discussing, we were
Not to put you on the
yeah,
spot or to eavesdrop.
yeah, no, it's completely fine. No, we were talking about adoption, right? Technology adoption, and like you're going to be in a different place just by the number of hours that you're spending every day interacting with the technology. So I was saying, like, somebody who's using it 8 hours a day you might, in a week, you might have, what is that, 40 hours of experience, right? Versus somebody who's using it literally every second of the day, even when you're sleeping or supposed to be sleeping. Um,
For the week.
Gonna have a lot more hours of experience in that, and then how that builds over time.
Yeah. Or imagine that being taken away and how much that would disrupt your current routines and processes, right?
I'm writing a book about that.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
This is a really good point, and actually we can learn something from the military here. So military learned very quickly that soldiers deployed to war zones come back and their knowledge is tenfold what a soldier who's been trained or been deployed for a few months. That 1 year of 12 to 18 hours a day, nonstop being a soldier, essentially amplifies their ability to understand and run command and control, to understand leadership, to understand the true risk evaluation of I'm here in a war zone nonstop and my mind has to be this fast, or I hurt other people, or other people get hurt, or the list goes on. But the
So it's just
reality,
that real world experience that
it's living it nonstop, the amount of hours. Like, it's literally like every day we go to work. Everybody goes to work, or most people who aren't like personally wealthy or sold their last company or whatever. But like, those people go to work and they work 8 hours a day. What happens when you take that 8 hours and you're normal, and for military, your bare minimum is 12 hours when you're overseas. So that's 4 hours every day times a year of more experience. That is, and the reality is, it's never just 4 hours. It's 14, it's 16, it's 18, it's 3 days straight.
It's also task diversity too, right? Like,
Yeah.
that, like 4 hours of doing the same monotonous thing over and over again is going to yield different results than 4 hours of stretching your neural like bandwidth over learning new things, and right.
It's called diversity and non-bias of training data, right?
I know.
You get more value when your data is not correlated.
Oh, it's full circle.
Randy's, we got to rein this in, otherwise we're going to be here all night.
Yeah.
I got to run to take care of a family thing, guys, but this has been awesome. Feel free to keep going without me. It's a good conversation.
This is a great stopping point. Thank you guys for the conversation. Of course, 2025 is going to be fascinating. We're here for it. We'll continue to talk
You're the
about
outcome.
it. Yep. We need a t-shirt, Year of Outcomes or something.
That's
or
right.
A hat.
Oh, I can think of so many non-clean versions of that.
That's your model, John.
Thank you, gentlemen. Enjoy the rest of your bourbon and your evenings and your weekend and all of that. And we will see you guys on the next episode. Thanks so much for being here. Adios.
Send prompts, not nudes. I just want to AI some shit.